It is fascinating times here in Defiant Wrestling as we turn our attention away from Magnificent Seven and look forward to Lights Out. The ReLoaded podcast is on the air. Dave Bradshaw here with James R. Kennedy. James, we are in the second week of the Rory Coyle era. Are you feeling any less freaked out now than you were a week ago? Because I'm still pretty unsure about the whole situation.
Absolutely not. You know, Rory Coyle, when he wasn't champion, was freaky enough. Now he is the face of Defiant Wrestling. He's even scarier than he was before. And we saw that presence that this man has right at the top of this week's Loaded. This man gives me the chills, Bradshaw.
I mean, that start to Loaded this week really was... I don't know what word you'd use to describe it. That it was this bizarre kind of like almost Oscars style acceptance speech we got from him, as if it wasn't that he'd won a wrestling title, but that he'd won an award for one of his videos he makes. And the list of people he chose to quote unquote thank was it revealed another side of a mind that we are starting to see more and more really is not right. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with Rory Coyle, and Coyle is now, his presence is starting to be felt in every corner, in every kind of sinew of Defiant Wrestling. The whole thing just feels just unpleasant. There's something hanging in the air with everything else we're doing. We know that this strange, bizarre, sinister human being is our champion.
Well, this video nasty is almost enveloping Defiant Wrestling as a whole under this cloud of horror. He really is. But you know the scariest thing about Rory Coyle? He's right. Everything he has said up until this point has come true. He got rid of Primate, banished him from Defiant Wrestling. Now it looks like he's done exactly the same to a man who held the Defiant Championship for almost 1 year. Rampage, he's out the picture now as well. So who else in Defiant can boast the same thing? Like him, loathe him, fear him, Rory Coyle is right. And that, really, to me, is the most frightening thing.
Here's what's interesting, though, and here's what's possibly a light at the end of the tunnel here, is that up until now, throughout Rory Coyle's Defiant career, he's been calling the shots. Because it's Coyle who decided that his first target was going to be Primate. It's Coyle who pretty much forced the issue in terms of a title match with Rampage by attacking Rampage when he was champion. If you remember that assault with those jump leads, which was pretty horrific. So there's been premeditated attacks, and Coyle's been able to handpick opponents who presumably, well, in fact we know, he had been preparing for over a year in both cases. Whereas over 2 years, when he was talking about Primate, you remember that talk about over 800 days he's been watching him and all that kind of stuff. Whereas now, General Amin, which I think is smart, has taken the initiative here. So his third target, Coyle's third target, isn't someone who he has picked. General Amin has picked his opponent at Lights Out for him. And I think it's a great choice because it's Justin the Hammer Sizem. And Sizem is someone who has just beaten John Bad Bones Klinger twice in a row. So there's no one, I don't think, who's on the current Defiant roster who is more deserving of a shot and has more of a chance of beating Rory Coyle than Sizem.
And what was it General Amin said? Horror icon versus superhero at Lights Out. Now this isn't, like a Freddy versus Jason scenario. This is Freddy versus Iron Man, or Freddy versus Batman, or Freddy versus Superman in the case of Justin the Hammer Sizem. Justin Sizem believes, and he always has since day one, that he is a great protector of UK wrestling, and he must be appalled when he looks at the antics of Rory Coyle, this sick, twisted nightmare of a human being, and the way he has this stranglehold over Defiant Wrestling, and more pertinently, the Defiant World Heavyweight Championship. Justin Sizem must look at Rory Coyle with that championship draped over his shoulder and think, that should be me. I should have that championship around my waist. We're going to see it. We're going to see if Justin Sizem can wrestle that championship away from Rory Coyle. The thing that Justin Sizem has to be wary of is Rory Coyle is not your run-of-the-mill professional wrestler. This man is sick in the head. He will do anything to achieve his goals, and I mean anything. And that's terrifying. Terrifying, Bradshaw.
Sizem, I think, might be the hero that Defiant needs, because if you're talking about how Sizem thinks he's a protector of British wrestling, well, if Defiant has ever needed some protecting, it's right now from our current champion. But there's one concern I do have about Sizem, and it's the same thing, I think, that spelt doom for Rampage ultimately at Magnificent 7. Because Coyle, if you remember, against Rampage was talking about how he wanted to bring out the beast in Rampage, the demon in Rampage. And Rampage approached that match in a very self-controlled way. He was able to keep himself as Rampage the wrestler, Rampage the athlete, Rampage the competitor, and fought a wrestling match against Coyle. And actually that didn't work for him. Whatever Rampage's strategy going in there was, by not doing what Coyle suggested and becoming super aggressive, becoming that beast that we know Rampage can be, it led to him losing the championship. And Sizem, actually, I would say, is even more self-controlled than Rampage. What I found really fascinating with Sizem in his feud with Klinger was that I think I tweeted something about how Sizem's going to be looking for revenge after Klinger injured his throat on the build-up to Magnificent 7. And Sizem tweeted back and corrected me and said, no, it's not about revenge, it's about justice. So Sizem's not a man who takes things personally and wants vengeance. He's a man who has a very acute sense of right and wrong. And so what he did with Klinger, and what I think he'll try and do with Coyle, is to go in there and try and rise above the mind games, wrestle his own kind of match, and try and beat Coyle that way. But that might not be the right strategy for Sizem. He might need to go to a place he hasn't gone to before, and I don't know whether he'll do that.
Well, can you imagine Superman wielding a steel chair or something like that, or a barbed wire baseball bat or anything like that? That is right in Rory Coyle's wheelhouse. He would think nothing, absolutely nothing, of wrapping Justin Sizem's body in barbed wire and watching him bleed as he repeatedly rains down blow after blow with a steel chair. To your point, Dave, I'm really not sure that Justin Sizem is mentally willing or even capable, because he believes in the greater good. I'm not sure Sizem is willing to go to such extremes, and that's what makes this one so interesting, because you have very, very good, the polar opposite of each other, and it's not good versus bad, it's good versus horrific, because trust me, that is exactly what Rory Coyle is.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I think there are, to summarise it, I would say there are lines that Justin Sizem will not cross. There are no lines that Rory Coyle will not cross. And that may, unfortunately, give Coyle an advantage.
Oh, Coyle, for me, psychologically, I really never thought we would see another wrestler in Defiant like Primate who could mentally psych his opponents out before the bell had even started ringing. Rory Coyle has taken that idea and he's taken it to a whole new level. I mean, you think about that. He psyched out Primate, dispatched him from Defiant, then he took on the alpha male, the man who, earlier on this podcast, a few months ago, we both sat here and wondered, you predicted it, that Rampage would not lose that Defiant World Heavyweight Championship for the entirety of 2019, because you and I didn't believe anyone had the physical strength to take it from him. We didn't take into account that someone would come along with the mental aptitude to freak Rampage out, take him off his game almost, and then strike just at the last possible second to take that championship. Rory Coyle is sick. He's demented. He's everything your parents warned you about as a kid in terms of the monster under the bed. He is a nightmare in human form. And Justin Sizem is the complete antithesis of that. He's the opposite. He is the great protector, and that's what makes this one so perfect. And I'm going to have to do something I thought I would never do, and give credit to General Amin, because, as you say, Bradshaw, Amin has almost called Coyle's bluff, which wasn't easy for me to say, but he has. He's called his bluff.
Yeah, he certainly seized control of the situation in a way that I think he needed to. Some important leadership there from General Amin to dictate to Coyle who he's going to fight, rather than letting Coyle dictate in the way he has so far. So that is our main event, we now know, for Lights Out. If you want to join us in Leeds for Lights Out, it's on Wednesday, April 17th at the O2 Academy in Leeds, and tickets are still available at wearedefiant.com/tickets. Now, speaking of Lights Out, another match was was announced for Lights Out this week on Loaded, because our assistant to the general manager, Simon Miller, gave David Starr the challenge of taking care of the John Klinger problem in our main event, and said that if Starr was able to beat Klinger, then Starr could get his hands on Gabriel Kidd at Lights Out. Starr did win that main event and will go on to face Gabriel Kidd, the man who put him on the shelf and got suspended for it for several weeks a few weeks ago. So it's going to be Starr versus Kidd at Lights Out. We'll talk about the main event of Loaded with Starr and Klinger in a second, but just looking forward to Starr versus Kidd. What's your initial thoughts on that one?
Well, David Starr roaring back into action after those injuries, and there were moments in that match, which we'll get to, against Klinger, where it looked like old injuries caused by Kidd were going to come back around. But he managed that pain and he came up trumps. Now he has exactly what David Starr wanted. Gabriel Kidd 1-on-1. Now, if you're Gabriel Kidd, he doesn't strike me as the kind of man who's going to lose any sleep over this, because right now, Gabriel Kidd, the young bull, will be formulating a plan, because he always comes with a plan. That's something I've noticed about Kidd, certainly recently here in Defiant. He always has something up his sleeve, and at Lights Out in Leeds, it's going to be no different. So for Gabriel Kidd, the big challenge might be looking at David Starr, realising all the torment that David Starr has put himself through over the past year and a half or so here in Defiant, the nearly man we've called him. Gabriel Kidd wants to heap more misery on Starr. Nothing would make him happier. This is an opportunity to do that. So yes, in a sense, it's almost a punishment for Gabriel Kidd, because David Starr wants to beat the snot out of him at Lights Out. But if you look at it in a different way, as I choose to do, this is a chance for Gabriel Kidd to do what he loves doing, and that is put people out the game and prove why he is a future heavyweight champion in this business.
I mean, Gabriel Kidd, as we talked about last week, really did take Joe Hendry to the limit at Magnificent 7 with that 20-minute time limit draw, and so much like you wouldn't maybe have expected Gabriel Kidd to be able to hang in there with Joe Hendry, a couple of years ago, the same would be true of David Starr. But now, as you say, it is a very different Gabriel Kidd to the one from maybe 2017, and so it is a big challenge for Starr. An interesting spanner in the works, interesting shift in the dynamic here is that both of these guys, both Kidd and Starr, seem to have picked up unlikely allies at the end of Loaded this week. Kidd came out to help John Klinger assault Starr. Klinger, typically being a sore loser, decided to attack Starr after the bell, after he'd lost the match. Kidd made it 2-on-1, and then none other than Joe Hendry came out to the rescue of David Starr, mainly presumably because he wanted to get his hands on Kidd. Hendry and Kidd still have unfinished business, obviously. What do you make of those two possible alliances? Kidd and Klinger I can understand, but Starr and Hendry, that is two big egos that don't necessarily fit together naturally.
It is, and Joe Hendry and David Starr never quite got the match that they wanted a while back on Loaded. They were going one-on-one. They viewed that as a marquee breadwinner for professional wrestling. They viewed that as the kind of match that would give them a showcase on Loaded to show off their skills to the entire viewing world. And thanks to Gabriel Kidd and the actions of Kidd beating up Starr, it never really happened the way they wanted. And you saw at the tail end of Loaded, right after Joe Hendry came out to save David Starr from another stint in the hospital, quite frankly, they went nose to nose and they were peeling one another off of John Klinger and Gabriel Kidd. They just wanted to beat the hell out of those guys, but there was a little bit of tension. Maybe it's just competitive spirit, maybe it's what you said, unfinished business. Now, we saw Gabriel Kidd recently as well, almost aligning himself with Rory Coyle, And now it looks like he's moved on to the badness John Klinger. Boy, Gabriel Kidd keeps some company, doesn't he? This is just another chapter in Kidd's rise for me. He is aligning himself with these dangerous, dangerous men for a reason. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens next. But I think there's trouble in paradise when it comes to Hendry and Starr.
Well, don't forget, we're still pretty early on the road to Lights Out. There's still 3 more episodes of Loaded before we get there. And as I say, there's a lot that can happen before Gabriel Kidd and David Starr stand across the ring from each other one-on-one, particularly if Klinger and Hendry are also involved. So it's a situation to watch, because I guarantee you we won't be in the same place with these 2 guys, with Starr and Kidd, by the time we get to Lights Out on April 17th. It was a busy episode of Loaded this week, by the way. We're going to have to move on and talk about some of the other stuff, because we've got a lot to get through. Tuckshop. Let's talk about Tuckshop, the newest tag team here in Defiant, and they picked up a maiden victory on their debut. We'll talk about the match, but what do you think of the name?
I'm not sure what to make of it. Newcastle liked it, which I guess shouldn't surprise me, but, I'm almost looking at this as fresh tuck, if you like, because this is fresh competition for those sought-after Defiant tag team titles, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a bit on this very podcast. But as for Visage and Jack Sexsmith, or Tuckshop as they're calling themselves, what a hell of a way to get started here in Defiant, because the anti-fun police, Drake and Santos, with no fun done at ringside, they're no slouches. This wasn't, just a situation that Tuckshop could walk into and expect to get the victory. They weren't going up against 2 scrubs who were put in there as ringers for Tuckshop to get that first big win as a tag team. This was competitive, it was all action, and I have to admit, I'm quite surprised that already Visage and Sexsmith, they've got some damn good chemistry. So again, we're going to have to wait and see how this develops, but already they look like they're forming one hell of a tag team here in Defiant.
Yeah, they look like kindred spirits, and it does make me think maybe this is the direction that Visage needed, because Visage has had a kind of a mixed start to their Defiant career, a couple of victories, but I think it was the first person eliminated right in the Magnificent Seven. So to get a partner from whom they can learn and can hopefully develop in Jack Sexsmith, I think this could be the best thing that's happened to Visage so far in Defiant.
It could be. This could be the spark that they need. Because you look at who the Defiant Tag Team Champions are. Again, I know you don't want me talking about these guys at length, but I'm going to do it anyway. The SCC, the South Coast Connection, deservedly the Defiant Tag Team Champions in my mind. They want some competition. They're going to get it if teams like Tuckshop start developing and really add some fresh competition, as I say, to this division. It's early days, don't get me wrong. Visage and Sexsmith can't just expect to waltz into a championship match at this stage. But if they keep racking up these wins, it's only a matter of time before management, they have to pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, actually, let's talk briefly about the tag team division, because it is, for all of the positives we're saying about Tuckshop, they are coming into the tag team division at a time when it's possibly more competitive than it's ever been here in Defiant, because as you say, SCC are the champions, for better or worse, or much worse, depending on how you look at it. But we've also got, obviously, Aussie Open, the former champions, still around. They're going to want another shot. They're going to want that rematch against SCC. The dynamic duo, who look absolutely incredible, especially for their age and their lack of experience in the ring, and they were very controversially robbed of their opportunity at SCC for the second time. So there's that going on as well. You've got Team White Wolf now, and Team White Wolf we saw on Loaded this past week, demanding, rightly I think, another chance at the Tag Team Championships, because their last shot at those championships, when Aussie Open were champions, was marred by a controversial refereeing decision. We now know that SCC will defend against Team White Wolf, A-Kid and Carlos Romo, on next week's Loaded, this coming week. So there are so many teams there competing. The Anti-Fun Police as well, you could throw in there. It's hard to see where Tuckshop are on that kind of contenders ladder, if you like. How do they fit in? Who do they need to get a win over before they can possibly start looking at the tag team championships?
Well, by default, when they formed as a tag team, Visage and Sexsmith would have to just slot in right at the bottom of that ladder. Because as you say, it's very competitive. Everyone is vying for a shot at those championships. Look at how long the South Coast Connection have been around here in Defiant Wrestling without getting that opportunity to hold those championships. So it might be a while before Tuckshop get their hands on those belts, but I wouldn't rule it out long term, certainly not. But yeah, for me, they're kind of milling around the bottom because, Dave, you know who's right at the top. Your boys, your champs, Ashley Dunn, Kelly Six, the Defiant Tag Team Champions, SCC. And okay, Team White Wolf, Romo and A-Kid, they're pretty damn impressive, I'll give you that. They've made a name for themselves all over Europe, all over the world, but they're coming into the South Coast Connections house next week on Loaded. The championships are on the line. This is one that everyone should be excited about. The SCC against Team White Wolf, I can't wait to see it. I'm going to give a little prediction though. The SCC, as they always do, will find a way, fairly I might add, to defend their championships.
Well, obviously, I'm not going to take the bait on such an amateurish effort to rile me up, because you know as well as I do exactly the tactics that SCC use. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to this match between SCC and Team White Wolf, not least because I think White Wolf will win it, and that would be wonderful for pretty much everyone except SCC and you. So we'll see what happens on Sunday when those two teams collide, and we'll see what happens with Tuckshop, because, as you say, very interesting time for them to enter the division. It's a very difficult time to enter it, but if they can get through some of those other teams and get to a position where they're able to challenge, then they will really have earned it, because there has been no time in Defiant history really where the tag team division has been so competitive. Now, speaking of competitive divisions, the women's division, my goodness, look at everything that's going on in the Defiant women's division right now. We'll talk about the champion, we'll talk about the other contenders, but first of all, let's talk about Laura Di Matteo, the newcomer, made her debut in dramatic style over Magnificent 7 weekend. By the end of that weekend, after the Magnificent 7 pay-per-view and Loaded, she was 2-0 up in her Defiant career. She's now 3-0 after this past week's Loaded. Laura Di Matteo has made an entrance, hasn't she? Quite some entrance.
Yeah, quite some entrance indeed. I made the point on Loaded that, there are parallels, similarities between Di Matteo and Kenji, the reigning Defiant women's champ. And what I mean by that is Kenji came in here and surprised everyone. And she started, racking up these wins and then tailed off a little. So for Di Matteo, she's now 3-0 at the start of her Defiant career. And by the way, what a victory on Loaded. It takes a lot to beat someone like Stunning Lana Austin by submission. To get that woman to tap out, well done to Di Matteo, or Di Matteo, as our ring announcer Stevie Aaron occasionally refers to her. We need to have words with him about that. But for Laura Di Matteo, in all seriousness, this momentum, it's not coming easy, but she's finding a way to keep it going. And where will this lead? Because inevitably, it's going to have to lead to a championship opportunity. That's what I believe, because Di Matteo, if you keep racking up those wins, you're going to turn heads. And she's already doing that. The fact that we are sitting here talking about Di Matteo shows you what an impact she's made early. I want to see more. I want to see how far this goes.
Well, one person who will be listening to everything you've just said and will be disagreeing with all of it, and quite angrily so, is Lizzie Styles. Now, Lizzie Styles had some very choice words, both for Laura Di Matteo and for Kenji, on Loaded this past week. She says that Laura Di Matteo is essentially kind of a Johnny-come-lately who needs to get in line because Styles has 2 non-title victories over Kenji, so she thinks she is the rightful champion. And as far as Kenji's concerned, Lizzie Styles has doubled down on the claim she'd already made that she thinks Kenji was faking her knee injury and is continuing to do so that she doesn't have to defend the women's title. Well, you're chuckling away, but I presume you're going to agree with Lizzie Styles again.
Oh, 100%. With all the praise I'm lavishing all over Laura Di Matteo, don't think for 1 second that I believe she is ahead of the one-woman army Lizzie Styles in the queue. There's no way. Styles has already proven her mettle. She's shown what she brings to the dance. I love this attitude from Styles. I really, really do. It's a take no prisoners attitude. It's right up in your face. She will tell you exactly what she thinks, and then she will kick the lipstick right off your pretty face. I love it. I think we need more of it in Defiant. And I think that Kenji has looked at someone like Lizzie Styles. She's maybe also spotted what Lana Austin brings to the dance as well, and she has thought about it and went, I'm not sure I can hang with these women. And we heard Kenji before. It wasn't I who said it, Dave. It was Kenji herself. I'm not sure if I deserve to be Defiant Women's Champion. Now, Lizzie Styles has just... She's looked upon those doubts and she's leapt right on them. She's currently going for the jugular, and you're damn right, she is ahead of Di Matteo in the queue for a shot at that women's championship.
Yeah, well, she will tell you that she is still undefeated. Technically, that's not true, of course, because she lost that three-way match to Di Matteo at Magnificent 7, but from Lizzie Styles' point of view, and I guess she has a point, it wasn't her who was pinned. It wasn't her who was defeated in that three-way match. It was Lana Austin. So as far as Styles is concerned, all of us talking about Laura Di Matteo having this undefeated streak as she enters Defiant, well, Styles has had the same, she thinks. And so she absolutely believes that she should be ahead of her in the queue. But by the way, we've had a question on this. If you want to join the conversation with us, as always, you can tweet us at DefiantRes, Defiant WRES. Use the hashtag WeAreDefiant and ask us your questions. We try and get through as many of them as we can. We've had a question on this subject from Angus Bell at AngusB316 saying, who is the greatest threat to Kenji right now? So presumably you're saying Styles.
Oh, yes. Yes, it's as simple as that. It's Lizzie Styles, and I'll tell you for why. Again, she is the kind of woman who is straight up in your face. She's not making any secret about this, Bradshaw. She wants to take that championship from Kenji, and she wants to rub her success in Kenji's face and everyone else's face, including the Defiant fans. Lizzie Styles could be a champion-elect here in Defiant Wrestling because, let's be honest, you need a bit of bite about you. You need that snarl, that kind of that defiance, should I say, that Lizzie Styles shows on a weekly basis. Di Matteo has been awesome inside the ring. We don't know much about her personality-wise, but we know everything about Lizzie Styles because she just doesn't keep it quiet. Kenji must be looking over her shoulder and she must see Styles catching up.
Well, my answer to your question, Angus, who's the biggest threat to Kenji right now, and if you'll excuse the slightly pretentious answer, but I would say Kenji is possibly the greatest threat to herself right now, because as you say, it was something we were talking about and we never got a resolution to it because of the injury. But before Magnificent 7, I was doubting more than you were, actually, that whether Kenji was mentally in the right place to defend that title, given that she had to be talked out of forfeiting the title. I think she did get past that. I think that pep talk from General Amin certainly helped her to kind of adjust her mindset, but we don't know how much more damage has been done to her psychologically, how much more frustrated she is by this injury. And you might not think it's a real injury. I'm pretty sure it is. I've got no reason to believe it isn't. But when she finally gets back and finally does get to defend the title, having had so many frustrations and having had all this extra time while she's been injured, sat in a bed trying to recover, unable to compete, all that more time to think, to ruminate about all these doubts that she's had. What does that mean for her when she gets in there against someone like Lizzie Styles or against someone like Laura Di Matteo, who is incredibly self-confident, on a winning streak? How does Kenji manage to get on that level, to get that same level of confidence that she'll need to beat either of those two?
Well, I think confidence is sorely lacking for the champ. I really do. And I know that you don't want to look at any proud champion in Defiant Wrestling and think that they are pulling the wool over everyone's eyes and faking an injury, but I have my sources, Dave Bradshaw. I'm a broadcast journalist. I do my homework, and I have it on good authority from several eyewitnesses that Kenji has been spotted out running. She has been in the gym. She's hitting those weights hard. She's on the treadmill. She's on the Stairmaster. She's doing everything she can. And this is what I believe. I believe that Kenji is doing all that. She's buying herself time. She knows the threat of Lizzie Styles. She knows the threat of Laura Di Matteo. She also recognises the threat of stunning Lana Austin and others as well. I think Kenji has been ravaged by so much self-doubt that she was willing to feign injury so that she would buy herself more time to train. That's what I think, and that's, by the way, fact, not fiction, because I have it on good authority that she has been spotted numerous times exercising. That's not an injured champion to me, that is someone who doubts themselves.
Well, if there's anyone from law enforcement listening to this, I think James R. Kennedy just admitted that he has someone, possibly himself, let's face it, who is spying on people in the gym, which is a little bit creepy.
That's not... Don't you dare twist my words.
That's what you said. You said it.
Don't... Listen, do you know how much those binoculars cost? Let's not get into that. How dare you say something so disgusting and foul about me, Dave Bradshaw? I'm a broadcast journalist. And anyway...
Well, in that case, if it's not you, who is it? Tell us who your source is, who's spying on someone in the gym.
Brian.
Brian
Millman, his name is.
Okay.
And John Hogan?
John Hogan.
John Hogan, yes.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. Now, we've had another question on a somewhat related issue since we were talking about Laura Di Matteo. Kimmy, who's a regular listener, Kimmy JB17, got it right this week, says, what's wrong with Chris Brooks as of late? He pushed poor Laura Di Matteo for no reason last Sunday during her post-match interview. He certainly did. And that was strange. So after Di Matteo's victory over Lana Austin, Stevie Aaron was trying to get a word with Di Matteo at ringside, and then out came Chris Brooks, told Di Matteo rudely that her interview was over, snatched your headset, and went on an absolute rant about how he hasn't been given opportunities in Defiant, and how, it was real just nonsense, particularly given what we're about to talk about in a minute about the opportunity he has next week. So Brooks comes out, but then quite aside from the whining and the whinging and everything he said during that little rant on the headsets, what he did afterwards was horrendous. Laura Di Matteo was still out there looking a little bit shocked that her interview time had been cut off, and he shoved her hard. She nearly fell into the staging as a result. Not on. Absolutely not on. Disgusting, really. And I'd assume it's the sort of behaviour you defend.
Well, it's out of character. Certainly for Chris Brooks, because previously he was all smiles, all high fives with a Defiant audience. But frustration does funny things to people, Dave Bradshaw. Now, you look at the recent history of Chris Brooks in this company. He's been gunning for those tag team championships with various partners for the best part of a year now.
And he's had several opportunities at them. So it's not like he can say he hasn't had the chance.
Well, he hasn't been able to get the job done, and it hasn't always been his fault. Chris Brooks might be the first one to tell you it's never been his fault. He's clearly not happy, and blatantly that frustration boiled over on Loaded. So I would like to take this opportunity, as much as it would be tempting for General Amin or Simon Miller or even the assistant to the assistant, Adam Foster, to suggest this, I would like to say to those fine gentlemen, don't levy a fine against Chris Brooks. Don't squash this potential. Do not take someone's disgruntlement and punish them for it, quite frankly, because I love this fire. Now, I didn't like the fact that he ripped my headset from me. That was a bit over the top, and if you were any kind of friend at all, you would have had words with Chris Brooks and had my back. But no, you had to sit there and bicker with Brooks and disagree with him when all he is doing is expressing his frustration. But that said, frustration will get him nowhere. Not in a match like we have next week.
Well, yeah, fair enough. We'll talk about next week, as I say, in a second. But even you must admit that regardless of whether Defiant should be angry at him verbally expressing his frustration, to shove Laura Di Matteo like that is not okay.
Well, no, you're absolutely spot on there. But again, frustration does funny things to people. It even does funny things to good people. And that is what Chris Brooks was, a good person. Everyone would agree with that. He was, as I say, all smiles, just wanted to do the best job possible. But look at what has happened in Defiant Wrestling over the piece. So many different members of the roster have grown frustrated with their lot in this company. And that can't be a coincidence, Dave Bradshaw.
But why do so few people, and apparently Chris Brooks is now in that number as well, why do so few people look to themselves? Why is it always someone else's fault? This was true of SCC as well. It certainly seems to be true of Brooks now. As I say, he is not someone who, contrary to what he claims, is not someone who has been lacking in opportunities given to him. But for one reason or another, when he's had those opportunities, mostly at the tag titles, he hasn't been able to get it done. Now, he can blame his partner all he likes if that's what he chooses to do, but he can't blame Defiant management. He can't say he hasn't been given the chance. And next week, he's got another chance. So he's in there against El Phantasmo, Mark Haskins, and Robbie X. One of those four men, whoever wins that match, will go on to face PAC at Lights Out. Now, that is a huge, huge marquee match for whoever wins that, and it's another big opportunity for Chris Brooks. So again, he's been put in a position where he can sink or swim, and if he sinks, it's no one's fault but his.
Maybe that's not the opportunity Chris Brooks wants, though. Maybe Chris Brooks is looking at this as a no-win situation. Because what if he wins that fatal four-way match next week? What if he then goes on to Lights Out in Leeds and defeats PAC right in the centre of that ring? What happens then? Is he guaranteed a title match? Does he get, a sizable increase to his pay in Defiant Wrestling? What is the carrot dangled in front of Chris Brooks? Maybe that was his point. Maybe wrestling PAC, as massive as that is to you and I, maybe it isn't enough for Chris Brooks. He wants a championship. He wants the glory. He wants to say with supreme confidence, hey, I am the best in this company. But for everyone else, Haskins, Phantasmo and Robbie X, they're going to be looking at this logically and with a different viewpoint. The wrestling world will be watching everything PAC does. So this is a massive spot to be in for one of these men. Maybe, just maybe, Bradshaw, Chris Brooks sees it differently. What's wrong with that?
Well, he obviously sees a lot of things differently, because I'm finding it really hard to fathom where there's any merit to any of his argument. I mean, it was such a petulant, childlike, just lashing out. I don't know how else to explain it. And as you say, very much out of character as far as we were aware, but he apparently seems to have joined that list of people who run out of patience before they earn the glory that they think they deserve. So unfortunately, that seems to be the Chris Brooks we're left with. By the way, though, very interesting, very intense interviews with all three of those other men in that match heading into next week's main event. El Phantasmo, Mark Haskins with a fire in his eyes that I don't think we've seen for some time. Robbie X obviously desperate for a chance to get a second crack at defeating PAC at Lights Out. It's going to be an incredible four-way match next week. You look at those four names involved. I mean, this one could be one of the best matches we've had on Loaded in a very long time.
There's no doubt about it. It's going to be breathless. It really is. And whether Chris Brooks wants to be part of this situation or not, or whether he feels it is beneath him, I am very sure that come next Sunday night, he will bring his A-game on Loaded. Now, you look at all the differentials in this match. Mark Haskins, who mentioned on Loaded that he was once partners, you told me that happened in Dragon Gate's Summer Adventure Tag League back in 2009, is that right?
Yeah, Dragon Gate, certainly. Yeah, I mean, a long time ago now, but they do know each other well. I mean, PAC and Haskins do go back a long way. I was commentating on those two when they were in IPW and some other UK promotions back in like 2008, 2009. And so, yeah, these are two guys who've been around the scene in Britain for a long time. Obviously, PAC in particular had some time away from the British scene while he was wrestling for WWE. He's now back over here. But as Haskins rightly said this week, PAC is coming back to face a very different Haskins. Things have changed while PAC was away, and the Mark Haskins of 2019 is nothing like the Mark Haskins of 2009.
There's so much going on here between Chris Brooks almost, spitting the dummy out of the pram, Mark Haskins wanting to prove to his old tag team partner, hey, things have changed around here, I'm now the man. El Phantasmo wants to go up against a fellow high flyer, and Robbie X, who faced PAC in his debut match here in Defiant Wrestling, he wants another shot. He isn't happy, obviously, with what happened the last time. He wants to rewrite history at Lights Out and get another crack at PAC. So whoever wins this match, do you know who the real winners are? Us, because we get to sit there and call it, and all the fans at home get to enjoy it as well on pay-per-view. So this is, I said for Chris Brooks, it's a... What did I say? It's a no-win situation. Well, for us, it's a no-lose situation, because every single one of these 4 men in this Fatal 4-Way, I would love to see go one-on-one with PAC.
By the way, we've had a question on this as well. Alex Jones at Johners with 2 N's, Jones_Alex. I probably wildly butchered the pronunciation of that tag, but he says, will PAC win at Lights Out? Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, Alex, to be honest, because we don't know at this point who he's going to be facing. So let me phrase the question to you this way. Who would PAC most and least like to face out of those 4 if he's watching, and I'm sure he will be watching, that big 4-way next week?
Wow, that's a huge question and a very difficult one to be put on the spot by. I'm going to have to look at it with, I'm going to have to look at it crystal clear, and without disparaging Robbie X, because I'm certainly not. I've been impressed by him, but PAC already holds a victory over Robbie X, so he knows what to expect from Robbie. So I would have to say that maybe, just maybe, I'm not going to speak for PAC, but I would guess that PAC would rather face Robbie X out of those 4 men. In terms of who he wouldn't like to face, well, that's an even tougher question.
I would say Haskins.
Well,
I mean, I would assume. I would assume PAC's not oblivious to what's been going on in the wrestling world while he's been away from the British scene. And he knows everything I just said about Haskins, which is that Haskins has come so far and crucially, though, knows PAC so well. So it's not only that Haskins nowadays obviously is right in that upper echelons of the talent in British wrestling, but it's also someone who knows PAC inside out. And that gives him an advantage over PAC if it's him that maybe the others don't have. But I mean, any of those 4 would be just incredible. El Phantasmo against PAC. Imagine that. What a match that would be. Or you've got Chris Brooks, for all of his apparent change in personality recently. In terms of an actual match, bell to bell, PAC versus Brooks would be phenomenal as well. So, as you say, it is a no-lose situation for all of us, and it's going to be an absolutely stunning 4-way match on Loaded.
I can't wait to see it. I really can. I used the word breathless, and I think I'm 100% on the money there, because you look at these 4 men who are entering this match and you look at their styles. Haskins is fast. El Phantasmo moves like lightning. Brooks, for such a physically large man, he can shift as well. And Robbie X flips around the place almost as good as anyone out there in the wrestling world. So you put those 4 men together, you're going to get something special. Don't miss this one, folks. Loaded, Fatal 4-Way, the winner goes on to face PAC at Lights Out. Bring it on.
All right, well, that's almost all we've got time for this week. But as we say, we've been talking about Lights Out all day today on the show. Don't forget, as I said, there are still tickets available for Lights Out. We're going to be in Leeds for that big show on April 17th. You can get tickets for that at wearedefiant.com/tickets. Also got some other dates coming up in the very near future. We are back in Newcastle 10 days after Lights Out on April 27th for more Loaded tapings. And how about this? Coming down the road, May 25th in Manchester, No Regrets, featuring the 3rd annual No Regrets Rumble. Tickets available for that online as well. And of course, both Lights Out and No Regrets will be available streaming live on Access Defiant at access.wearedefiant.com. All right, so that's just about it. How's your love life?
You had to ask. I've got an announcement here. Where's my soapbox? I've got a horrible announcement, Dave. I'm sorry to announce this, but I found out something disgusting. Something so foul. something that makes me feel sick to my stomach about my darling Taylor Hanson over the weekend.
What?
I thought we were set for life. You know this. You know, I've been leaving you voicemails, you never pick up the phone. I've been sending you texts, you never reply to them. I've been DMing you on Twitter with selfies of Taylor and I enjoying fine cuisine all over the world. I thought we were set. But morally, I can't look myself in the mirror as a man if I continue this relationship.
Why not?
Oh, it's sick. You don't want to know. It's so foul and depraved that I feel like I'm about to blow chunks. Dave.
Go on.
Dave.
What?
Taylor is a massive fan of Benji.
Well, we all are.
It's sickening. She even bought his latest t-shirt. And get this, she customised my favourite Halliburton to look like that little Squirt's Magnificent Seven briefcase. As a man of taste, I can't tolerate this kind of nonsense. So I had to do what I didn't want to do. It broke my heart. I was crying all night. I had to call it quits. I had to tell her to bop out of here. I even caught her mimicking the Tuckshop's little gesture. You know that thing they do where they tuck something between... I'm not sure why she was doing that. Anyway, I'm a free man, and as much as it pains me to say, it's back to Tinder for me. This is horrible. I was crying all week. I feel like I'm getting totes of mosh just thinking about it. I can't believe that my darling Taylor Hanson and I are no more, but I can't stomach someone who is a fan of Benji. I just can't.
Well, congratulations to Benji, by the way, for retaining the Magnificent Seven briefcase against Conor Renshaw this week. And, of course, the real big breaking news from that little monologue, that little soliloquy there, is that James R. Kennedy is back on the market. How about that? There's a catch. Wow.
I think we're going to have to give this next week's girlfriend or this week's girlfriend or last week's girlfriend or whatever we called it a little break, because I am heartbroken. This has to be the worst news ever. Now, I thought it was something else when Catherine Zeta-Jones, she sneezed and soup came out of her nose in this 5-star Michelin restaurant. I thought that was horrible enough. But when Taylor Hanson told me that her favourite wrestler in Defiant was Benji, I felt my stomach do backflips, and not in a good way, not in the way it did when I met her at first. I'm sorry, let's not talk about this. Change the subject, right, please.
Why don't you console yourself by telling everyone what your Twitter handle is in case they want to tweet you?
Well, you can tweet your condolences, you can send me gifts to cheer me up, you can do whatever you like within reason. At Top Class Kennedy on Twitter. You can also get me on Instagram as well, where I've had to delete all the pictures of me and Taylor Hanson. I'm cracking up again, Dave. Let's move on.
All right, well, you can get me on Twitter at Dave Bradshaw. I'm on Instagram as well at Dave Bradshaw83. Thank you all for listening. This has been the Reloaded podcast. So apart from being heartbroken, nothing else happening for you this week. You're just going to lie in bed and sulk.
I think.
I tell you what. You know what? No, there is one thing that's going to happen to you.
What's that?
I've just remembered. You've got 3 days left to give me that trophy. You might be in very, very serious trouble with our general manager.
Have a heart, for crying out loud. I've just opened up to you and told you that my love life is in tatters. I'm going to be spending the next few days in bed watching The Notebook on repeat, and all you can think of is, this Defiant Commentator of the Year trophy. I can't even think about that right now. Have a heart. I think if you or General Amin were actually decent human beings, you would extend this and give me another month at least to think about this and get my life back in order.
Nah, you got 3 days. All right, thanks everyone for listening. Obviously, a big episode of Loaded coming up this week, including that 4-way match for the right to face PAC at Lights Out. Tag titles on the line, as well as SCC defend against Team White Wolf. Much more as well. We'll see you on Loaded this Sunday, and we will be back next week with another episode of the Reloaded podcast.
Benji, of all people.